It's Friday, man. It
Friday.
is time to gain some perspective. I like it when people head into the weekend with some stuff to grind,
Yeah.
right? Like whether you're mowing your lawn or whatever you're doing around the house. That's almost like when you leave the gym and then the muscles build.
Yep.
That's how I feel about it. How's your week been going?
Yeah. Long, good week. Well, I tell you what, just green lights across the board. It's rare that, with the clients I'm engaged with, we'll have green lights across the board, but green lights across the board right now. Business engagements up, business services up, retention up. All the things that we're looking at metrics wise, I keep waiting for some bad news out of habit, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's something that we're used to, I think. So every time we're taking a step forward, we're about to feel as though we're going to move 3 steps back.
Yeah.
So many people are afraid to dream right now. They're afraid to like cast their mind out past next week because it was every version of COVID, A, B, C, D, X, Y, and sometimes Z, like it was just crazy. And now all of a sudden there's war. What's it like? Why shouldn't somebody just like get in the hole right now? Or like, why shouldn't they just buckle down and get ready for the next like beating? This is what I think everybody's thinking about. And that's why we do this.
Yeah.
So I'm here with Scott Connors, Chief Change Officer at Crankset Group. He's helping people make decisions about the turbulence right now, because like the truth is the reason you got to get moving is because it's not safe to stand there. And on my side, I talk to a lot of people about visibility. My name's Taylor Hack, and I am the marketing strategist at Gravidia. And we think that it's going to be tough to be valuable if you can't be visible. Welcome to Leadership Line of Sight. Let's get some perspective. And Scott, I think that's kind of the theme song you and I have been talking about for a little while is gaining visibility in order to show people that you're valuable.
Yeah. And it starts with, there's turbulence. You're in an airplane, there's turbulence. So what do? You just rise up or go around it. You can see it. The radar is the key part. How good's your radar, right? And if you feel like you got good radar and you trust your instincts, everybody else saying, but I think that, well, then go there. You rise above the turbulence or you go around it, right? And that's the visibility right now. Branding, I think, critical right now. Great opportunity to be really focused on your personal brand, and I was with a CEO of a very large corporation this morning. And, I said, and I won't, names and we, NDAs and stuff, but, your name is Bob Smith, CEO of X, not X company, and then your name. So your personal brand, that visibility of you and your personal ideas and who you are as a character. And you don't have to look far for examples, do you, brother? I mean, give everybody some major league examples of the personal brand that drives the brands themselves.
Also, like the idea behind this is that people make relationships, corporations don't make relationships.
Right.
So I'm like, I got my eye on Bob Iger right now. He's the former CEO of Disney. And the reason that this guy's special to me, he's on my vision board, is because he was entrusted with Pixar straight from Steve Jobs, as he was entrusted with LucasArts straight from George Lucas. Like, what kind of guy are you when people will like, they basically entrust you with their babies?
Right. Right. Well, he's the kind of guy that's up at 4:00 in the morning, making sure the parks have COVID protocols in place because he wants to ensure that his guests are safe and then his people are safe. That's a guy that cares about his people.
Yeah, and I think that resonates with the people around him, and it's interesting to see how, because that person was in that like position at that time, this was the benefit of Disney. And that's why I think that they would agree also that it should be Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, at the time that was present. And if you're not watching him, you should definitely watch him because he's doing some things in NFT space right now that I think that the person that understands Imagineers, like that was like part of a division of Disney stepping into this new digital space involved in the metaverse. I think that's going to be somebody to watch.
Yeah, Kieran said last week, the NASA iTech, she said that space is the next economy. Well, what do you mean, right? Like there's this chasm right now between metaverse and NFT and even crypto and those things that there's a lot of us, including me being one of them, that just doesn't really understand, like doesn't really know. it doesn't mean there's not a whole universe of opportunity out there, right? To lean in, to learn. I think these are times to be visible. The most valuable is the most visible, to use your words, but also to learn. Like lean into the things you know nothing about, because that creates space for ideas. Like I don't know what NFTs are. I don't care. I'm not buying a piece of art that doesn't. Well, what does it mean? And what business am I in? And is there an opportunity? Because they're going to need suppliers. They're going to need materials. They're going to need hardware. They're going to need software. Where's the opportunities there?
Yeah, and am I positioned for those, or should I be looking for other opportunities? Because there's some people that this should be like, this could be interesting. This could just be like almost like the concept car of business for them. It's not something they're going to drive. Whereas right now, there's so much exchange going on in social media, and there's so few people that understand it.
Yeah, right. And it's that lack of understanding that does what? Nothing. It does nothing. If you don't even at least try to understand what's coming, then you're not leading and you're not thinking about building and developing and reimagining and imagining. And you better be doing that right now.
You know how many people I talk to that are in very high level situations where everybody would assume that they're super confident, but when they talk about things like operating in general as a person on LinkedIn or as a person on Instagram, that they totally lack confidence. And I see these people inspire so many powerful people around them. And for some reason, it may be that they can't see that confidence has a direct relationship with understanding.
Yeah.
And as soon as they can get an understanding of it, that's where confidence will come from. But so many people seek understanding. It would be like losing your balance and trying to remember what balance was like.
Right. And really at the rubber meets the road. I mean, let's use some examples. Like we probably have some lawyers watching, some accountants watching, some doctors watching. Pick any one of those three. All of those economies and all of those new things and all of that technological advancement, there's opportunity for those three. You can pick any profession that's out there, any industry that's out there. It's all going to play a part in the new thing. What role does your company play? How do we get prepared to represent people at this law firm for NFTs, Bitcoins, and things like that nature? How do we do that? How do we get into the IP world? How do we get it? That's the expansion of your mindset and your imagination space inside your organizations right now. And your people want to imagine. You got to make them imagine. You got to give them the space to imagine. I created a tool that we use a lot called the Idea Factory. It's a weekly meeting. Everybody in the room, bring your ideas. Right? Bring your ideas. And you should hear some of the ideas and you should see how much of them get adopted.
That's funny because you and I have a lot of parallel thought, and in an Evernote that is like too thick for anyone to ever read, I have a book called The Idea Factory where I would just take notes into it because I knew that I would make more ideas than I would ever action.
Yep.
So I just wanted a place to store them so that I could be like, oh, I thought about that once before. Do I have to like kind of run through this concept again? But when I think about like businesses taking a look at like what's happening right now, I think that airplane analogy that you introduced, where a plane's traveling along and suddenly it introduced to turbulence, right? And now a lot of the time they know this is coming. You hear the captain come on and say like, "Hey, we're going to run into a little bit of turbulence." Like they know a lot about this, and so that's where the understanding is going to come from. And then what you were talking about was to rise above it. So I see that there's going to be turbulence in places where there's like odd competition, or you're kind of almost like competing in the argument instead of changing the conversation. Right. So when you were saying like elevate, go above where the storm is, I think that has a direct relationship to marketing. How visible are you? And what I mean by that is I'm going to break it down a little bit because you and I have been talking about this as things progress. So you have a great LinkedIn following, and with your following, I think that it is it's important to know where followers find you. You know, like since we started doing this show, you were talking about numbers on your LinkedIn changing, and that was people just actually getting to see the cut of your jib. Yep. Like why we talk the way that we do on this is so that people understand what it would be like just to sit down at the same table where you and I might be having breakfast.
Yep. And for me, it was leadership by example, right? For me, it was I'm working with all these businesses and I'm talking to them, and some of the things I always say, every client, I don't care what they do. agnostic here. We're in the content business. Every single person in this enterprise needs to feed content to their marketing departments so that we can get it out there. Anything that is of interest or educational, or even if it's human interest, and you like it, it stopped you, send it. Let the marketing department decide, right?
This is going to lead us to some problems. And I love it when it leads us to the obstacles, because that's the way, right? So when we talk about that in general, then people are like, oh man, like what do I share? Like the hardest thing about making dinner is deciding what to eat.
Yeah.
You know? So this is where marketing has started to come to another level. So you can actually see what the audience wants to know. There are some great websites out there that talk about trending questions related to industry. You can make ideal client profiles and take a look at what the pain points might be to that specific group. You can also find where your communities are online. So it could be that you're like, oh, the demographic for my company is consumers. Like if I'm a consumer oriented business, maybe my ideal client profile also happens to shop at Costco. Well, that means that if I position myself close to where this Costco gets so much attention, I can get a bit of their shine. Mm-hmm. Like with Gravidia, my company, we kind of talk about it all related to space. I was thinking that I think that Pluto was a planet from like 1974 to 2006. And the truth is that Pluto was never a planet. It just suddenly had really good exposure. And because it was so visible, it became valuable to us in a way that a misshapen rock probably never should have.
Right.
But I find that like with people, like more people should know you. Like that's why I do this podcast with you. Is the way that you help people navigate challenges is kind of key. What do you think when you talk to the people at in leadership positions that you talk to right now? If you were to summarize their fear, what is it?
Well, I think the real way to look at it is fear itself. Let's define what fear is. And everybody fears different things, and we all face our fears in different ways. So two things. One, we'll go back to the airplane analogy because I used it this morning. So when we do hit turbulence and the captain has come on and said, keep your seatbelts on, stay in your seats, we're going to experience some turbulence. And inevitably, one or two of the flight attendants is walking somewhere down that aisle, and that turbulence hits, and they just keep on walking. They don't even lose their balance. They're just used to turbulence. And one of the things that we've all gotten used to right now, the whole world, is turbulence. So, the thing to look at is inside your organization and say, you know what, we can handle turbulence because we just went through I almost said a bad word storm. And so we can handle turbulence, right? We can handle turbulence now. Let your people handle turbulence. It's okay if things get bumpy. We're used to it now. That's the first thing. Second thing is and I give this exercises to CEOs all the time. Fear is a mindset. It's a natural human reaction. What you need to do is blink, open your eyes, and say focus. Change the emotional energy, the kinetic inside your brain energy that's fear, and say focus. Because we focus on, or we fear that which we lack focus on. When we don't know, we fear. Turn the lights out in the middle of the day one time, a group of people. I did that once. I won't do it again. But I tried this experience of mayhem. It was pure mayhem. And of course, I got just ridiculed for that. But everybody was scared at the same time. Lights came back on. Everybody's refocused. So we fear what we don't know. Face your fear by turning it to focus.
Yeah, that's like the when it comes down to how people view this, like how people perceive different things, that's the thing I find needs to change the most. Mm-hmm. I guess to give a little bit more perspective on that, I think that social media feels that way. So for us to say to anyone, would you go on LinkedIn and shoot a video? I think that they perceive the potential of all the people that could possibly see them, and that's who they think they're standing in front of, right? Where a failure of social media is actually nobody looks at you. So failures are actually more often private on social media than they are public.
Well, but also, and you got to think about this from the perspective of the person we're asking to be on camera, right? What are they thinking? They're thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to say something and somebody's going to put a negative comment in there. So that's a fear. So how do we focus on that? Well, let's be prepared for the negative comment. And I coach them all on a one-liner. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your perspective. Move along. Be done with it. You can address it. You're ready for it already. It's turbulence. You know it's coming. Right? The captain's, I'm telling you, it's going to happen. It means people are engaging. You're engaging. You're getting the attention. And if somebody's negative, then thank you. At least respond. Don't leave it out there. Thank you. I appreciate your perspective, and move on. Right? And what did we learn about that person? Is that person in our demographic? Is it in our geographic? It is in our client space. Yes or no? Normally, no. If it's in the client space, address it. Right? Why is this person unhappy with me or our product or our service? That's not a problem. And that's rule number one. There's no such thing as problems. They do not exist. Problems are nothing more than opportunities in workflows. That's all they are. Ken.
Oh, sorry. I like your perspective, and I appreciate that there's so much that people can basically learn about themselves and how they react that will control a lot of their outcomes.
Right.
I also think that there's kind of some confusion about how things change when you elevate the stakes. Like almost everybody's comfortable walking along a 2x4 when it's on the ground. But as soon as you put it between two 6-foot ladders, pretty much 90% of people are out. And then if you put it between two 60-foot ladders, almost everyone is out, but has the activity really changed?
Right. Right. And you know who goes the highest? Those that have learned to fall. They've learned to fall when it's on the ground. They practice falling on the ground. They practice falling at 3 feet. And when they were ready and comfortable, they went to 6 feet and then 8 feet. All of a sudden, they're walking across the board. They don't even realize there's ground beneath them because they've practiced the failure. And so if you go, go ahead.
So I see that slightly different because I think that for some reason people imagine somebody falling off the 2x4 at ground height and it doing nothing, but they're at 60 feet, they're going to get hurt. Yeah. And I think that more so maybe you and I are talking about when they're on the 2x4 with no risk, they try all the things that would lead them to failure because there's no consequence. Mm-hmm. And so now they know where failure would happen when they raise the 2x4 up. You know, like it's not like billionaires learn how to bounce if they go bankrupt. Right. But they know a lot about like what would lead them to that, and they tried it at like lower risk.
Yeah, but in a culture, right? In a corporate culture, in a small business culture, there's this adversity to failure. There's this adversity to falling. There's this adversity that, oh, if I fail, then I'm going to lose my job or anything, or people are not if you bring into your culture that you want to fail, and I core principle when companies work with me is we don't lose. We're done losing. We either win or we learn. And we start all of our sales meetings and all of our business development meetings and even our ops meetings with, what did we learn? What was our learns from last week? And I try to hold them weekly at the beginning and say, what did we learn? You learn so much more from what your quote unquote losses are than you ever learn from your wins, ever. Because that's what you're supposed to do, is win. Well, what did we learn when we lost? Was our price too high? Did we? And it always comes back to the same thing, Taylor. Always the same thing. We failed to show the value.
Did you ever hear about the billionaire that he was teaching his kids by helping them buy nickels?
No.
Oh, this is something that I found interesting. I think it was actually in an Anthony Robbins book, and he was talking about how billionaires look at risk and reward differently because we're kind of taught in school to like bet $1 to get $1, but nobody in their right mind should be taking that much risk. Like 100% risk for reward. I don't know if that's really the way we should go about it. So he was kind of mentioning that a lot of the times billionaires would say, well, you know what? I'd do like 6 cents on the dollar because then I can go like, 18 times or somewhere in there. And so I look at it a little bit that way when I look for reward that comes where risk is really controlled or asymmetrical risk. And they noticed that copper outvalued a cent, even though pennies would never be worth less than a cent.
Mm-hmm.
But that ship had already sailed, but it turned out that that was going to be a very good blueprint for what happened with nickels. And nickel ended up outvaluing an actual nickel, even though you would never be like the government rule would essentially insulate you from ever having a nickel be worth less than a nickel.
Right.
So through doing that, they were able to find a great way to control asymmetrical risk, and they bought $1 million in nickels. And then the billionaire taught his sons hard work by having them haul them all into storage.
Love that.
So there's a few things like this that really resonate. And this type of messaging and this type of storytelling, I think, is really common among those top leaders, right? Like a lot of the leaders that you talk to, storytellers. Are you all right over there?
Yeah, the blind just fell off the wall as I was pulling it down. So might get a little.
Oh, you're trying to control your lighting. And
Yeah. And the whole blind just fell
that
off.
was glass for a second.
Yeah, that's nothing broke though. We're good. Carry on, sir. There you go. Fail forward. There it is, right there.
Well, we've had everything. We've had fire alarms go off during this. Like we're trying to make podcasting is something that used to have to be exclusive podcasting used to be exclusive to studios. I remember the first podcast I did a few years ago, we started in my basement, and due to like people responding, we actually ended up moving it to a studio so we could get higher quality like audio experience. Right. But now, like, I'm in my office. This is where I spend the day. You're in your office.
Yeah.
And now we're able to achieve this, but not without the regular chaos of the real world.
Well, I might want to read the instructions when I put the blinds up. I think that was the thing. I thought I could do it without maybe reading the instructions. The new blinds, because I was trying to control my lighting.
Well, when we talk about these types of things, I like how you've been moving this through this process, because I think that if somebody were to retrace the video on here, you've really upgraded things like your surroundings, right? Mm-hmm. So you noticed everything that was in the lens, and you started to control a little bit about your atmosphere. Mm-hmm. Lighting was also something that you improved because in order to get this experience on video, you have to kind of have some lighting in the front and maybe something that illuminates the backdrop. That's also something that really changes what someone's experience is. And then further to that, after you get those two things organized, it gets really easy to do video.
Yeah.
Like, if you found that since you've got your setup done, that it's changed your experience where you're talking to people on Teams and different things?
Yeah, well, and you can see the big microphone right here as I pull it up a little bit. So I ask into that because I am paid to be with people, and I want to be as close and in the room with them as I can be. And so I'm always asking the questions. Can you hear me well? Am I coming through well? If the audio changes, please let me know. You ever notice, Zoom calls and somebody's talking, but no one can hear them? It always takes a good 10 seconds before somebody says, we can't hear you. Let's lean into that, right? And also the environment that I'm in. Is it warm? Is it comfortable? You'll notice I put a chair behind me recently, upgraded the table. I want people to sit with me. I want to feel like they can sit with me in the room. And so I say to them, hey, have a seat in the chair and let's talk. And that feels inviting. And so I think that if we recognize in life, it's the little things that make the big differences, and we really take a pride and a passion into our work, right? This is nothing more than reinvesting in my business. So I'm going to lead by example by reinvesting in my business. And I'm going to continue to do that. And also I encourage everyone else to do the same. Look at yourself on camera, listen to yourself, record yourself. Go on your Zoom room with nobody else in there and start a meeting and look at what's around you and see what they see, because what they see and what they hear matters, because you're in the business of that. You're in the business of communicating at some level.
Hey, do you like surprises?
I love surprises.
Awesome. Today we were supposed to have Courtney Bueller on, but unfortunately she was unable to make it. We're really excited to share her story. She's got such a cool story.
Yeah, I heard.
But when she wasn't able to make it, there's some of my friends watch this, including my friends from Eris MD. So I normally get together with Scott and Chandra like probably once a week, but I've never got to introduce you. So we were talking to Kira last week, and what she was saying is the technology that Scott Edgar has conceived was so valuable that it was a security risk. I want to introduce you to my friend Scott Edgar.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Thanks for the intro, Taylor.
Scott, I have to say, as far as remarkable minds go, I can hands down say I've never met anyone who can pace with you. It's remarkable. To give you some perspective, I'm going to go with your last name, Connors. Scott Edgar here. How old were you when you started coding?
How did I know that question was going to come up? I was about 4 years old when I first started, programming with computers.
What was your first program?
You know what? I don't know that I could honestly answer that. I was pretty young, and it's hard to remember that stuff clearly. But I do know that I had books on basic programming that included a bunch of games and things like that. So I would program in these games so that I could play them. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I actually didn't even have a storage medium. So every time I wanted to play the game, I had to type in the whole program for it. So that actually helped me learn to type really well as well.
Awesome.
That's incredible. Now, your ability to type very well kind of came back into your story. And I think at some point you had maybe typed out a little program and then did a press release saying that you could break the typing speed record.
I don't think we ever went as far as issuing a press release or anything on that. It was something that was kind of discussed within the company. That was with Drift. We were building on-screen keyboards, and I mean, you can find, if you look, there was a TechCrunch video. I think it was 2013 where we were the runner-up at TechCrunch. But at the time, the speed record for typing on an on-screen device was at a certain level, and in our testing internally, I was able to type at least as fast as that record, and so there was the potential to maybe break it, but we never went that far.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah. So Scott Edgar has a dog that's I think under 6 months.
Yes, she is,
and she's
I was hoping that she would be a little quieter for this, but.
We understand, actually. And seeing as you popped in here as a treat, we get it. Like, Hugo is cruising around here somewhere. In order to keep the snoring off the microphone, we have to teammates. But if you find that she's picking up, there is a mute button I think you found already.
Yep,
but
I did indeed.
So you can patch in. We can even go CB radio style.
Yeah. I might just lock her out of the room if she keeps up.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I remember when you and I had first met. So I was coming back from Silicon Valley. I was nominated for Realty Innovator of the Year in San Francisco for Inman Magazine. And while I was down there, I had a friend that was connecting me with the director of global security for Facebook. So I was touring in, and I was really like face pressed against the glass. Like just stepping into Silicon Valley to see what was going on and how it was like a meritocracy of ideas. That energy was so inspiring to me. So then when I came home, Chandra and I think were exchanging when we were boarding planes or something like that. And literally like 2 days later, you and I are sitting in a cafe and you're showing me how MRIs could be floating inside of people's heads. So Scott Connors, to give you an idea, I was wearing this visor in a cafe and I was viewing an MRI in augmented reality, and you could see what was possible with ArisMD. ArisMD basically can change the certainty behind surgery. Why did you choose that?
Well, it's interesting you ask that. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you found that you haven't met people that can pace me, but actually my partner Chandra can pace me quite well. And we were at CES, and when we were at CES, we were looking around, and a lot of the innovations were not that innovative. Give me one moment. I apologize.
Yeah, take your time. We all understand. So who Scott Edgar is talking about is Chandra Devam. And Chandra is she's exceptional in very contrasting ways to Scott. The two of them have been friends since they were children, and the way that Scott can basically hack computers is the same way that Chandra hacks people.
Right.
The way that
a great assessment. It's not just that though. She has really great vision for technology and where it's going, and coming up with these wonderful new inventions, which kind of comes back to the whole question that you had, which is related to the MRI, in that we were wandering around CES, and that year 3D printing was really big, and there was not a lot going on at CES that seemed particularly novel and exciting. And we were talking about, there's this new technology coming out or resurging in terms of virtual reality, and augmented reality was kind of being developed. And how can we take these technologies and create something that is going to be beneficial to not just us, as a company, but to people in general? And medicine is one of those industries that really sees very little innovation. And not to say that there's no innovation in medicine, but innovation is very slow to be adopted because, of course, safety of patients is priority one, right? And so Chandra had this great idea. She said, well, why don't we use these technologies, and we can take these images that people are scanning, your MRI for your brain, for example, and we can have doctors not only look at it in 3D, but also able to overlay it on the patient so they can see it during a procedure.
Innovation is one thing, but the application of innovation into a marketplace is another. And to see that you found a childhood friend who is also a visionary and a partner who can take your vision and apply it to a commercial application is the makings of what I call the single most effective and formidable corporate structure in the world: partnership. That's a great story and a great example. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, these guys almost have twin speak. Have you ever met twins that like have their own language between them?
Yeah.
It's really neat to have the level of trust that they have between two people, because it allows them to operate totally interdependently, like autonomously and together.
Yeah.
It's quite exceptional to be around, and we always like enjoy chatting, but we're often chatting on projects. And when I was just kind of thinking about the history of moving up to where you're working on things now, and now you're drawing some lines together. Like when you were walking around CES, Chandra's taking that vision, and it helps you understand what like where to direct or what challenge that you would want to overcome with the build. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, and I mean, even just to identify the technologies that are up and coming and where they're going, she's got a really wonderful grasp of kind of big thinking, and seeing there's a gap here and there's this new technology here, and it's kind of just emerging, and I think this technology is going to be big and we can apply it here, and there's a huge market, and I mean, in my experience, she hasn't missed the mark on that yet.
Yeah, it's really neat for me because my principal skill is messaging. And so when we were going to different places like Augmented World Expo and talking to all the different types of people, it wasn't just like, hey, we have this augmented reality in surgery. It was, this is what we can do, but how do you think it fits you? And we ended up moving from surgery to aerospace, from aerospace to other industries. Some of the explorations that you've done with ArisMD have been incredible, but the spectrum's so wide. What, like when you talk about the technology that could allow certainty in surgery, what are the other applications that we can share now?
I mean, I think that when we talk about things like mechanical inspections, so you look at something like you have an airplane that's been brought to the ground and they have to take it all apart to do maintenance and inspect all of this stuff. Well, if you can just scan it, then you can look at it in 3D and look inside it, and you don't have to take it apart. That I think allows for a greater certainty, and you can pair that with AI so that you can actually have kind of a predetermined, like, this is how this object should look. And of course, not just aerospace. I mean, we're talking about manufacturing, anything where you want to know what's inside something and be able to see it without actually having to take it apart. And so they can look inside and say, oh, well, there's a crack on the inside of that fuselage or something like that. And an AI can quickly diagnose that and say, wait a minute, there's something here that shouldn't be. So we need to take a look at this. And the potential savings for things like downtime on an airplane would be absolutely enormous.
I think that we've seen something from Boeing that was talking about just the wings being over $137 million a year in this type of maintenance. But it's really exceptional when you take a look at all the things that they're valuable, like that we take apart right now to verify, right? Like all of the airplanes that spend time, I think that a lot of them are hundreds of man hours per year, where like there's actual metrics of how much mechanical time versus the actual flight time. And this would massively change those outcomes. But also, I think it would bring certainty to flying. Like how many things fail because we couldn't see them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an ongoing thing across all industries. I mean, even if you look at things like in the US where they had decaying infrastructure and things like bridge collapses occurred, if you could just scan that bridge, then you could look at it and see, oh, okay, well, there's an internal structural defect and we need to deal with this before it becomes a problem. And I mean, those are just a couple of examples, but in my experience, every time that we talk to somebody in a new industry, they're like, oh, we can see how we can apply this technology. And so I agree with your statement that it's just so broad.
Yeah, and look at all the things that there's so much invested in when it comes down to like physical integrity that this could possibly verify. So we are talking about aerospace, but we're also talking about humans. Oh, I think we lost Scott Edgar. He's probably going to be coming back here right away, and I'll circle back to him. But that's oh, yep, and patched back in. There you are. So when we're talking about verifying the integrity of these high value elements, one of the things that surfaced over time was also athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So think about these multi-million dollar contracts.
Absolutely. I mean, whether you're looking at a sports team that wants to, re-sign an athlete, or teams involved in trading athletes, or even non-human athletes. If you look at things like thoroughbred horses, the way to essentially create a depreciation report for a biological thing, there's a lot of value for those industries. Being able to look and see, okay, this person wants us to sign them for a 4-year contract, but this analysis says there's only 2 years left in that knee. You're going to want to sign a 2-year deal, not a 4-year deal.
Even from the athletes, like from that athlete's perspective, understanding what their career might look like is also going to be a key element.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that. If you have athletes that have, certain wants that they want to accomplish in their career or something, knowing how much time they have to accomplish that is probably very important.
And the athletes that do all the things to care for themselves may be able to use this type of information to negotiate better contracts.
Yeah, that's totally a valid point.
It's going to be really interesting when you can also combine this with other technologies that are existing, like stem cells, and emerging, like CRISPR.
Yeah. I mean, anything that we can get scanned data from. So even DNA, in theory, if you can get a scan of it, we can visualize it and allow it to be manipulated in 3D, and that's kind of the underlying value proposition, is that we can do that with anything that you can get us imaging of.
So just to complete the loop, because I have been like thinking about this technology and dreaming of it, like I'm investor number one into ArisMD, and how can you resist, right? And and really when you take a look at what this can do, because Scott, part of your history was shaped by medical error.
Yeah, not mine specifically, but I suppose more broadly, yes. In that my partner had a procedure that should have been very simple, and actually resulted in a near-death experience. I mean, that story, of course, is not really mine to share, but I know that she does share it in some of these things. And the fact that she went through that, and the questions of like, what happened? Did I have a bad surgeon? What caused this? And the reality is that we are as different on the inside as we are on the outside. I mean, you and I have different physical shapes. There's no way that our anatomy can be in the same place. And so when surgeons cut into a person, they are in essence cutting in blind, because it could be that an artery is, half an inch to the left of where they would expect it to be. And so this gives that certainty of being able to see, here's exactly where that artery is, and I know to be careful not to cut there.
That's something that when you break it down into steps is kind of interesting, because like a lot of the data that this technology uses is available. Like all of those images that they get at the hospital are DICOM images, ultrasound, MRI. All of these can be imported from where we already collect them. So it's not a new technology that even needs to collect images like this. They just need to be incredible quality. And then it's in virtual reality that you assemble this. Now, that's something that became a lot more interesting as the metaverse has taken shape. Could you imagine a surgery is being done by two people or a surgery is so unlikely that the only surgeon that's ever completed it is in Japan?
Yeah, and I mean, not only that, but the third, even given all of this information, medical error is still the third leading cause of death in the United States. I mean, that's scary in and of itself. And not only that, but there are surgeries that are deemed to be so high risk that insurance companies will not allow surgeons to perform them. And so if we can make those safer, then it's possible that those surgeries can be performed and lives saved in situations where they would otherwise just be deemed as, the chance of the patient surviving or the chance of us having an insurance issue due to this surgery being performed is too high. So we just won't do it.
So we see evidence of that because you hear that some procedures are being performed other places in the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the idea of being able to kind of remotely be a part of a surgery, almost like having guiding hands or something in virtual reality, where somebody can say, okay, well, I can see this surgery and I can walk you through how to do this safely. And we can even perform it together using shared augmented reality. Even a pairing between virtual and augmented reality, where you have, in the example you gave, you have your surgeon in Japan who's in virtual reality looking at the same procedure that the surgeon is in augmented reality. And that surgeon in Japan could actually guide them step by step through what to do in order to make sure the patient is safely operated on.
Isn't that unbelievable? Like somebody could essentially meet with a mentor and your anatomy in the metaverse and practice.
Yeah.
Well, but also think about the educational applications. Okay, guys, we're in medical school and we're not going to open our textbook today. I'm going to take you inside the actual surgery that happened last week on this particular type of surgery. Please put your goggles on. I mean, talk about the immersive learning. And there's a lot of really serious conversation of where businesses are looking for better tools. Even if we just kind of dumb it down, if you will, all the way to say even marketing tools, like if I post somewhere, why can't I just post everywhere? Where's the immersive learning in this? Where's the better tool? You're providing an educational tool that saves lives at the point of impact. So from scan forward, everybody benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's been an ongoing issue in medical schools where traditionally they've used things like cadavers for surgical practice and anatomical exploration. But not only are cadavers becoming harder to find, I mean, that's something that it just becomes
I didn't know this was a problem.
Yeah, and chances are that the cadaver is not going to have the specific thing that you want your class to study. And so in this case, you could use in essence, a virtual cadaver where somebody could perform and practice a surgery that actually happened. And that would be a huge benefit for surgical students.
Oh, imagine that. So when we take a look at like large scale elements like this, eventually you could capture all of these surgeries that happened and use that as a database to determine how surgeries are done. Also to compare all this data using computers so that you can say like, oh, okay, this is like a huge history of anatomy and all the different ways that we've tried to do this surgery as we were seeking higher results.
Absolutely, and I think you could even take it a step further than that, where as an AI system learns about surgeries in general and how they work, it would be it would be comparable to the engineering optimization problems you see, where you'll have something where we need a lightweight material that meets these things, and they have an AI system that will design a material or a structure that will meet those needs. We could see the same thing in medicine with enough data where there's this thing where we deem it inoperable, but an AI system might look at it and go, well, but it's not. You just have to do it this way.
This was this thing that I found so confusing because for me as an outsider, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the principal skills for surgeons is that they have a mental capacity to be able to take 2D imagery that don't look like what they're doing and extrapolate that to 3D. So they take a 2D MRI that doesn't look like the inside of your head, and then they're able to deliver results in a three-dimensional world where like the room for error is only a millimeter. Like this is why this is the third largest killer.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, is that yes, to an extent they can recreate that in 3D, but that 3D representation that they recreate might not be perfect. It probably won't be. The reality is that your brain can only do so much of this, and the number of images that you can internally process. I mean, yes, a great surgeon is probably better at it than a mediocre surgeon. But when you look at it truly in 3D, you might see things that you completely miss when you're looking at a reconstruction you've made on your own.
It's also like, I find it also interesting about what can change. Because like using robotic surgery, we can also change that the angle of the instruments are always being held by hands, and all of a sudden they can come from entirely different angles. We can also say like, oh, okay, now when we take imagery in, we can filter it through AI systems like Scott mentioned. So not while we're in there, we may notice secondary, tertiary, we may notice a whole series of different problems that are contributing to outcomes. There's a study that I remember looking at, and they did a test where they took a whole bunch of images and they were sending them through radiologists. Mm-hmm. And they're supposed to get their primary issue, their secondary issue, as many as they can. And then they took these same images and put them through their test group 6 months later. The one difference that they did with this plan that massively improved outcomes is that they put their social media profile picture along with the images. Suddenly the humans got better. They were better at spotting primary issues. They were better at spotting secondary issues. On occasion, they would even spot tertiary issues. And this was due to them suddenly caring by putting a face next to the images that fly through their computer screen at rates that would surprise a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Now, that like computers don't have that cognitive bias. They would have caught them every time.
Yes, and I mean there have been studies done where they've shown that AI in radiology can pick up things that a radiologist never would because they don't deem it to be a major problem. But when you take that information, if rather than a radiologist having to go through each and every issue to identify primary, secondary, tertiary, if you had a computer go through it and flag to the radiologist, hey, look at this, this, and this, it would save them a lot of time. And even if they decide that, maybe this is not something that we need to worry about, at least it's been flagged so it's not missed.
That's very interesting, because a certain number of scans over your lifetime with something like this could lead to like an actual health plan. And if we could measure all the people, we could manage we could manage healthcare way more effectively. But this is the reason that I consider this to be such a challenge. And I really think that often the failure of genius is that they coast. They don't look for the largest challenges that they can solve. And honestly, when you're taking a look at what you're looking to solve, the thing that I think the thing that hurts me the most about what I've learned about the healthcare system is that when you improve technology, for some reason here in Canada, it improves man hours. And that doesn't happen in any other industry.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. And your comment about finding large challenges, I'm lucky to have a partner who will never shy from a large challenge. She looks at things and finds kind of, what's the biggest scope of problem that we can take on here. And as I said, she's amazingly good at identifying those things. But I agree 100% with the state of healthcare in Canada. We don't tend to be first adopters. What will happen is you'll see a technology that's been adopted and proven over years in the US or the UK or somewhere like that, and then Canada will look at adopting it. And it's unfortunate because it really could change the way healthcare is here if we were more willing to adopt things.
Yeah, it's that's an interesting perspective. Scott, what do you see in the States?
Well, I would tell you that our healthcare system is abysmal. I would tell you that our healthcare system is broken. I would tell you that our healthcare system is probably our largest embarrassment. Just look at our numbers. Just look at our health, the health of this nation. Look at the obesity. Look at how obesity is treated. Look at insurance companies and what they pay for or what they won't pay for. And most Americans share this consensus with me that are outside of the system and some inside. Our healthcare workers are underpaid, underutilized, unempowered, and becoming uninspired. Our payment systems are arduous and overburdened. I heard a story of a wealthy man who went in and hurt himself, and he went into the emergency room, got some stitches. And they came in, and based on where the area he lived in, which he happened to live in a sort of a very rural area, based on his zip code, they just assumed that he was going to need some help paying his bill. So they never asked him to pay for it. They just asked him if he wanted to sign up for the healthcare plan for the state. No, thank you. And so it just went to medical collection, and he let it go. Could pay this bill a million times, literally. We just let it go and let it go through the system. And that price changed from 800 to almost 1800, and then all of a sudden went back down 800. And now he's getting collection notifications from everyone. All he did was try to pay, but no one ever asked him to. And yet people call it free healthcare if you need it. But what's subsidizing that? So our whole entire system is broken. The only thing that's not broken is our doctors. They're still very good at what they do. They're very passionate about what they do. And those men and women work very, very hard. Our surgeons, our doctors, but everything around it from a business model perspective needs an awful lot of work.
Yeah, I think it comes from a lot of tools like this because the frustration in hospitals is so high. Like my wife is an emergency nurse, and her experience over the last few years has been nothing short of traumatic. Like it's very hard for somebody who's inclined to help to see people that are helpless.
Yeah.
Right. And it's difficult because it happens during COVID, but it's not exclusive to that. Like what Scott Edgar is talking about with some doctors not being able to approach surgeries that will save people. Think about having to live with that.
Right.
And what we're talking about with being able to take a look at what prevention would look like would disrupt current systems. And some of those interests are directly against the outcomes of patients.
That's right. That's right.
But there's a lot of alignment here. So like when you take a look at like getting adoption into this type of system, you've taken your technology to a lot of places. Scott, Edgar, can you talk about some of the places that you have taken ARIS-MD's technology and introduced it to? Like I know you've been to Mayo Clinic and Harvard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have been to both of those. We've also been to the Cleveland Clinic. We've been over talking to the NHS in the UK. Honestly, my experience is that the conversation is easier everywhere that isn't Canada so far. And it's unfortunate that that's the way it is. But I mean, one of the issues I find with Canadian healthcare and adoption of technology is that the Canadian healthcare system is not geared to look at technologies that are not associated with a Canadian research university. And so in order to get those conversations going, you need to find somebody who's involved in that entire ecosystem that is willing to be a part of the project. And without that, they just don't talk to you. It's almost like the not invented here thing, but on a federal level rather than a corporate level.
That's wild because like when you take this technology to those places, like obviously a place like Harvard, they would be working on similar projects.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
What does that feel like? When you're going to some of these places that are the known entities for innovation, and you've got the project that you made in your pocket. Like, does it feel like when you were showing like a friend that first video game that you programmed?
A little bit. The difference being that that friend that you talk to isn't involved in programming. It doesn't really know what you've done or how it works. They're just kind of like, oh, that's neat. But these are people who are working on similar problems. And the most common question we get that, of course, we don't answer is, how did you do that? We've spent all of this money trying to do what you've done. How did you do it? It's just, you two working out of a basement versus us with this huge research institution trying to do the same thing. How come you were able to do it and we're not? Tell us the secret.
So a lot of people they don't know that that's possible from a single person, right? Like I remember one of an incredible experience for me was when you took me to Apple Park.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife has a set of Beats, and the employee discount on her Beats was from the president of Apple Keyboards. And he was probably one of the first people that came from one of these iconic places or a team around him that looked at you and said, "How did you do that?" Is that a little bit more of what it's like when you see Harvard, is when Apple saw you?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, that's definitely, it's a good feeling to have people say, how did you do this? And what have you done here? This is fantastic. It's a great feeling to have people saying those sorts of things. I mean, even with the prior company, which was sold to Apple, it was kind of, solving problems that had not necessarily been solved and finding ways to do things in new ways that somebody else hadn't thought of. And that's kind of the critical thing, is being able to think outside the box, because a lot of people will look at a problem and they kind of try and expand on whatever the historic approach is. But sometimes what you really need is a new approach and fresh eyes.
Man, I remember talking to the girls from Skylabs when they were saying, yeah, there was this guy who wrote a textbook and he left me a secret note, so I invented this thing that they needed.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic.
Right? Like I just, and to think about that, like for myself, what I'm hearing from you that I would really like to bring back to maybe a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old Taylor is take a look at the problem and follow the yarn till you get to the ball, till you get the largest problem that you can conceive, right? Because so few people actually go and try to crack the big puzzle that just being there puts you ahead of everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's where the real value is at the end of the day. I mean, if you're solving something that's just a piece of the yarn in your example, then you're only kind of getting partway there. And you're not really dealing with the core of the issue, because somebody can just reel out some more yarn. But if you go and find that ball and deal with that, then you're dealing with the real problem, and you can actually move things forward in a meaningful way.
I totally agree. So when you take a look at where things are going right now, because there's a ton of announcements about things like metaverse and NFT and crypto. I like your summaries on some of these things because you're paying attention to these differently. You see some of them very much as novelty and other things are real. So let's take 3 buzzwords that don't have any connections. We're going to say cryptocurrency, we're going to say metaverse, and we're going to say, let's make the third one NFTs. All right. Okay. And can you give me some one-shots on this? Let's go with cryptocurrency first. What is your thought as someone who understands tech the way you do?
Cryptocurrency to me is something that, honestly, the closest parallel I can find is the Dutch tulip craze. I think that people are buying this because of a perceived value and a perceived use, but there are fundamental issues that will occur with it over time. I mean, the cost to perform a transaction on a blockchain-based cryptocurrency is enormous. I mean, if you're going to go and buy a $3 coffee, it's probably going to cost you $12 because you have to pay the fees to make this happen. But not only that, there are a limited number of crypto coins that will be mined. And the cryptocurrency network is supported by people whose computers are mining these coins. And once there are no more coins to mine, the incentive to remain part of that network drops off to the point where the network will likely collapse. And so I see it as a short-term perspective thing where yes, people can definitely make a bunch of money. You buy low, sell high. Yeah, you can be an overnight millionaire. That's great. But at some point, the music is going to stop, and you don't want to be the one without a chair.
It's crazy to say that there could be this much parallels between cryptocurrency and Pokemon cards, but that's a lot of commonality. This could just be something that's valued.
Somebody's willing to pay for it.
All right, so that's definitely what we would call a dissenting opinion or a minority opinion as compared to a lot of people, and I think that they should take your perspective. Now, let's move on to the second buzzword that I was talking about, which is metaverse. Mm-hmm. There's some people that saw Facebook change its name to Meta, start talking more about the metaverse, but honestly, like, you've been involved in that for a long, long time, like the understanding of that. So what's your take on metaverse?
You know what? I think that there is potential for that to be a very pervasive and fantastic thing. I'm really a big fan of the idea of the metaverse. One of the big missing pieces in the metaverse right now is so people have this perception that, like, you can go and your primary thing in the metaverse is playing Pokemon, to use your example. So I'm going to have my avatar that looks like a Pokemon, and I'm going to go meet you in your Call of Duty metaverse, and I'm going to look like a Pokemon. The connective tissue to make that happen does not yet exist. And that's going to be a big thing, because right now, the metaverse itself is very fragmented into different ecosystems owned by different entities, and there's no free movement between those. There's no connection between those. And so I think that'll be a valuable piece that really brings it to the forefront. The other barrier for entry, which is obviously improving, is the cost of the headsets to be a part of it. And, they used to be extremely expensive. They're now getting down to the point where they're becoming affordable. And I think that at the end of the day, the metaverse will be a great tool for, international and even just intra-city collaboration and meeting points and all of this stuff. There are some pieces missing, but we're getting there. So I think that's going to be around for a long time.
So I think that a lot of people, when they think about the metaverse, they kind of think about going to the mall, where they could go into the store that you're talking about, like maybe the Pokemon store, and then head over to the Call of Duty store and everything. You just stay inside the mall. But it's more like an outdoor mall, where you would actually have to leave the metaverse right now and kind of re-enter to the next store if you were going to shop from shop to shop. And that type of fragmentation is going to limit what the promises of metaverse are. Am I hearing that?
For the short term, yes. I mean, I think an easier parallel for that would be like changing between apps on your phone. You have to go back to the home screen so that you can open a new app. And right now we're in a situation where that's kind of the experience you're going to have. So you're not actually leaving the metaverse, but you're leaving that portion of it in order to be able to select a new one. And so when we reach a point where there's kind of that connective tissue where you can go from one to the other seamlessly, I think that will really draw people further into it.
And finally, NFTs.
Okay.
What's your take on these non-fungible tokens?
Well, so there's a couple of things with this. I mean, first, you preface this as three unrelated technologies, but I would argue that NFT and cryptocurrency are in essence the same thing. The difference is that a crypto coin is mined and an NFT is minted. Which means that you have an infinite capacity to create NFTs. NFTs of real world things I see as being low value. I can't actually think of a real world industry where there isn't a better and cheaper mechanism to manage ownership of things. I mean, if I'm going to buy a piece of art, for example, there could be value in owning the NFT of that piece of art. But personally, I would prefer to own the real piece. The NFT could serve as proof that I own this for something like insurance or something like that. But so could me having a picture of it with me in the picture. There are simpler ways a lot of the time. An NFT, like a cryptocurrency, is something where the value is the value that somebody is willing to place on it and what somebody is willing to pay for it. Where I see the value of something like an NFT is in the future tied back to the metaverse. So again, all three of your topics are kind of tied together. The value I see for it is there where you can have uniqueness within things. Like say you want the latest the latest Gucci purse, and you want to be the only one that owns it. So you buy the metaverse version of that purse, which does not exist in the real world. It only exists in the metaverse. And you are the only one that owns it. It is uniquely given to you. So you have an NFT that shows that you own it. But it becomes valuable when the system itself enforces that ownership, meaning that somebody else couldn't design one that looks identical and load it into their avatar and be using it, because the system would look at it and say, well, that's a copy of this. That's owned by somebody else. It's unique. You can't have that. And I think at that point there becomes a little more value, but I think that's going to lag behind the metaverse itself. And honestly, I think that there are probably easier ways to build and enforce that system than using a blockchain NFT system. And so it may never come to fruition in that way.
I find it so interesting. Like if you compared it to real estate, a lot of people live in houses, and to understand that a house's value is part on its utility, which would include its location and its characteristics. Where is it, and what can it, like, who can it house, or what can it, what its utility is. And then novelty, which often in houses includes their condition. Like, does a lot change about the value of being in a house? Like, does the counter still work when it's not a quartz counter? It still does have the utility, but the novelty value remains. Right. Houses that are renovated actually do achieve higher values than ones that are not. So then when we take this idea and apply it to things like crypto and NFT and metaverse, they may be very high in novelty value right now. And the utility value is still being defined. And the utility value will also be subject to things like regulations that haven't been set yet. And that's some of the things that I think will shape how this comes together. But I really think that some of these things are going to maintain being novelty. Like if we say that attention is the highest value currency, well, in games like Call of Duty, they have skins when you make achievements. So once you get to a certain level, which will take hundreds of hours for the average person, all that changes is the value of an NFT. You get that exclusive skin, that exclusive like badge that shows that, you know, in Call of Duty, you've achieved what they call prestige mode.
But this is, so not only is this a perfect example of what I was saying, but you can look at that, and I would be willing to bet that Call of Duty is not using an NFT system to determine who has that skin and who can use it. So I think that there's a novelty in, it's almost like people have discovered this unique concept in blockchain where they have a technology and it's a solution looking for a problem. And the problems that it can solve, I mean, there are problems for which blockchain is hugely applicable, but there aren't a lot of them. The technology actually that I'm more bullish on is quantum computing, because not only will quantum computing allow solving problems that a traditional computer can't, but in theory and probably in practice, a quantum computer will render things like cryptocurrency essentially useless. The cryptocurrencies are based on the key for a cryptocurrency is based on prime factors, which means it's finding a number that has only one set of factors other than one in itself, and those factors are exclusively prime numbers. So if that makes sense. But a quantum computer can reverse that equation in a heartbeat. And so when quantum computers reach a point where they have sufficient power to be able to decrypt these cryptocurrencies, in essence, my understanding of it is that using a quantum computer, you could then start spending crypto coins that you don't own.
So this would be like the ability to adjust crypto coins infinitely without anyone's control. So I guess a lot of people think that blockchain, because it's based on this pneumatic, like it's a mathematical like challenge among computers. Right. So imagine that you took like humans and mechanical devices could essentially work out what prime number is to a scale that that computers can't right now. But quantum computers not only could do that right now, but they could do it like in the blink of an eye.
Right.
And so you would have a blockchain eraser, which is really bad news for things that would be created of NFTs or cryptocurrencies, because you could simply erase them, but you could also just erase parts and change them in any way you see fit, because you would be able to code back in there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. I know that we have to cut out. Scott's got a hard run right now, but Scott Edgar, you podcrashed, and this was lovely.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to having you back for a full episode where we'll have some more questions so that you can decode what's going on in technology from us. This was Scott Edgar from Eris MD, as well as Scott Connors, the Chief Change Officer of Crankset Group. And myself, I'm Taylor Hack. I'm the Marketing Strategist at Gravidia. And I hope that you all have a remarkable day.
Thanks, Taylor. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Taylor. Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much.